Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate. Tonight I'm talking to London Mayor Boris Johnson and then to three of the people who hope to replace him in City Hall after May the 5th. In his first major television interview since announcing he was going to campaign to quit the European Union, he spoke about what went right and wrong in his 8 years at City Hall. But I started by challenging the Mayor about his support for Brexit.
Well, I think that it is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for this country to get out from under a project that I think is nothing like what we signed up for in 1972. And it's becoming more and more federalist. There's less and less control that we have over what goes on. We spend, as you know, net about £10 billion, between 8 and 10 billion pounds goes, which we never see again. We can't control our borders. So this is a climactic, once-in-a-lifetime moment for us.
But it's a gamble for London.
I don't think it's a gamble for London at all.
But your own report by Dr. Gerard Lyons says we're better off in than out. I think we can survive out, but we're better off in than out.
What the Lyons report says is that we're better off in a reformed EU. And actually, he says we're better off out of an unreformed EU. And the sad thing is that we haven't had reform of anything like the scale that we need. This thing is continuing to basically to boss people around, to take power to the centre at the very moment when we're trying to devolve power here in Britain to cities, to nations, to regions, and it's totally crazy. It's anti-democratic. That's my objection. Look at all the things. If you look at the problems we have building housing in London, so much of it is actually caused by environmental impact assessments, directives about habitat, stuff that's actually...
You're blaming your failure to build enough houses on Europe.
No, partly the difficult... Take, for instance, something that was really important to Londoners, the spate of deaths of cyclists that we had, many female cyclists, at the end of 2013. Do you remember? It was an absolutely terrible period. And I wanted to go to the government and say, we need to change, and TfL was absolutely convinced this was the right thing to do. We need to change the configuration of those lorry cabs so that they can see vulnerable road users. And everybody was agreed in TfL. That was definitely the right thing to do. The government wanted to back it. We couldn't get it done, basically, because that decision is taken at a European level. And there is such a proposal to have safer cabs so that drivers can see vulnerable road users. But it's currently blocked in the Transport Ministers' Council by France and by other countries because they're protecting the interests of their manufacturers. So power, authority, that should be here in London, should be with the British government to make a change that would actually save people's lives, has been given away to Brussels. Now, if you say, what about the city? And what
the
about
City of London Corporation thinks we're better off.
The financial, yes, absolutely, and and Peter Mandelson and all those characters are out there fighting and making the same old points. Well, they said that, Simon, about the euro. Don't forget what they said. They said if we didn't join the euro, then giant mutant rats were going to come out from the gutters in Throgmorton Street and eat the last British bankers alive or whatever. It never happened. Actually, what happened since then was London powered on.
Have you spoken to David Cameron since you made your decision?
I speak the whole time to my friends and colleagues in...
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister?
I speak repeatedly to my friends and colleagues in government. I'm not disposed to go into conversations.
Can your relationship with him recover?
Listen, of course it can, and indeed I don't believe there's been any damage to the relationship between any of us in the Conservative Party. We are determined to get this right. We have different views. I passionately believe that the European project is now taking away too much democratic control from the people of this country.
Are you prepared to do a TV debate with David Cameron on Europe?
I am going to be making my points in any...
That sounds like a yes. You're up for it. I'm going to be
making my points in any forum I can. As I said the other day, I don't want to feed what I think is a false narrative about rivalry between, or competition, or whatever, all the arguments in the Tory party. I think that is totally wrong. This is about an issue to do that is of fundamental importance to the future of this country. And so I want to, as far as I possibly can, to avoid, as I say, debating my fellow Conservatives, and I won't do that.
When Boris Johnson arrived in City Hall almost 8 years ago, he was a backbench MP with no ministerial or even local government experience. One of his first acts was to ban alcohol on the Underground. Predictably, it led to the mother of all parties on the Circle line. The mayor honoured a manifesto pledge to replace bendy buses with a new version of the Routemaster. Critics said it was too expensive and too hot. His cable car over the Thames was similarly dismissed as another vanity project.
Your Majesty.
The long-talked-about Crossrail project finally began on Boris Johnson's watch. Cyclists celebrated the first of a network of segregated bike lanes. Some other road users were less impressed. The 2012 Olympics proved to be a proud moment in London's history, and the mayor became known around the world thanks to one particular publicity stunt which backfired. The Boris years at City Hall have been marked by triumphs and stumbles. Let's reflect on some of the things that have happened in the last 8 years in London since you've been mayor. What is your proudest achievement?
I think the best thing, frankly, is the way the city is now. If you look back to what it was like 8 years ago when the whole thing went off a cliff and it looked as though everybody was saying London was... There was a cover of Time magazine which said London falling, and it had a picture of the city being submerged beneath the waves, and everybody said it was, London was going to be Shanghai, Dubai, Mumbai, and bye-bye London, they said. And that's not what they're saying today. London is unquestionably...
How much has that got to do with you?
Well, no question at all that I think some of the policies that we pursued did help. And we've been very, very active in making sure that we kept the investment coming in London. Crossrail, remember when the crunch came, could have been chopped. We've gone ahead with that. It's on time, it's on budget. We are progressing Crossrail 2 now, very aggressively, with a lot of oomph, and we're hoping, and I'm very certain that there will be some good stuff in the budget to get that project going by the end of the next, get that project done by the end of the next decade, and that is 50% bigger even than Crossrail. That is a colossal project.
What do you regret? What are the missed opportunities?
I think that is, well, I mean, I'm sure you will find some things that we've cocked up. There are some. Look, it's a huge operation.
You got off to quite a slow start. Were there wasted months and years because you didn't have the right team around you?
I think that's a fair criticism in the sense that for the first few weeks, certainly it was
probably months until Sir Simon Milton came on board.
I think that's probably a fair criticism in the sense that not many people expected us to win, and it was a fantastic moment. But yes, it took a while to get going. But then once it got going, it was. I think a huge amount of progress was made.
Do you regret the lack of direction on cycle lanes, the blue painted roads that we saw 6 deaths on Cycle Superhighway 2 in the space of 3 years before you suddenly realised that segregated lanes were the answer? Well,
that's why I made the point about how frustrating it was to have some measures that we wanted to bring in to make cycling safer actually frustrated by the EU. Look. Yes, in an ideal world, we would have blasted ahead with the right cycle lanes from the beginning. But it is a very difficult thing. Road spaces are hotly contested between people.
It took a lot of people dying before you finally got it right.
Well, hang on. I mean, but be fair. Be fair here. The numbers of deaths of cyclists have actually been coming steadily down. I think the deaths of vulnerable road users are now at basically a 40-year low, and in fact, the lowest on record, I think. And they've fallen by 40%. It's the lowest ever, which is quite an achievement by Transport for London and our surface transport guys. Yes, we've made it safer, much safer. Thinking back, would I have gone for the big segregated superhighways to begin with rather than experimenting with the original model of the cycle superhighways? Yes, probably I would. But you learn things as you go along, and you have to admit, Simon, that some of the protests that we've had against the cycle superhighways that are now going shows the real difficulty of getting a really big and ambitious project done in London. I'm now convinced that the segregated lanes are right, they're beautiful, and they're already transforming transforming people's journeys, cyclist journeys, and making it much safer.
Housing. How much of a regret is that you just haven't been able to build as many as London needs? Not even as many as your plan demands, let alone what London needs.
Yes, well, on the other hand, we've had to keep revising our plan because London has been so extremely successful. If you remember, back when you and I were turning up to debates for the mayoral hustings in 2007, 2008, housing was hardly on the agenda because basically there wasn't the demand and the prices actually were very rocky and if not falling. We've had to respond to the huge popularity of London. It's the most dynamic urban economy. We've built more affordable homes than any previous mayoralty. We've done 100,000, and the rate of building now in London is the highest it's been in our lifetimes virtually since 1981. The trick of it has been to put in the transport investment to make those schemes viable. And so what you've got across the city now is areas that people never thought were going to be the kind of place where they wanted to live, actually becoming really desirable, attractive, wonderful neighbourhoods because of good transport. Look at the way, ask yourself where prices have gone up the fastest in London in the last few years. Walthamstow and now Newham. And Newham is the biggest zone of house price activity, and that's an amazing tribute, by the way, to the regeneration that's followed the Olympics. And
talking of the Olympics, you will remember, of course, that was the event where you were cheered and George Osborne was booed. You must be very proud of the Olympics.
Look, I mean, the Olympics were a wonderful moment for London, and I enjoyed it hugely. And did you say I was jeered? I didn't remember being jeered.
You were cheered. George Osborne was booed.
Oh, I see. No. I see what you mean. No. Look, I think the Olympics were a great moment for the city, and I think what they did was they brought everybody together in a way that we sort of didn't expect. And I remember the magic of it. And I still cycle. Sometimes I still get on my bike and I just go off and cycle around the Olympic Park, and I remember what it was like. And it still has magic in that place, and it's changing very fast, and it's now a wonderful place to live.
Finally, can I ask you how good an apprenticeship has been the mayoralty for the next big job?
All I can tell you is that we've got we've apprenticeships, we done them.
Your apprenticeship. Let's talk about yours.
180,000, Simon, apprenticeships we did. Never mind my apprenticeship too.
How well equipped are you for a bigger job now?
I've always said that the mayoralty of London is a huge job, and I was very surprised. I said it to win. I think a lot of Londoners were very surprised that I did win, but it's been a huge education for me and a wonderful opportunity. I think that we've done some very good things, some wonderful things sometimes. Yes, we've made some mistakes or some things I wish that we'd seen earlier, done earlier. But overall, I think that when you look at the regeneration of London, you look at the huge investment now going into the city, the fact that we're the #1 tourist city in the world. Look at the huge growth in the whole the tech sector. We got young. You talk about housing. This is an interesting fact. We got young people moving to live in London in spite of the costs that you mentioned. So somehow or other, in spite of all the difficulties, it is the most dynamic urban economy in Europe, and I'm very proud of it.
And for you, what will that next big job be?
I think that sorting out my sock drawer or something like that. I don't think it's going to be. Not that I've ever done such a thing.
Boris Johnson, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, from a man on the way out to City Hall to possibly greater things to my second half panel. All familiar faces on this show and all hoping to replace him in City Hall. For the Liberal Democrats, Caroline Pidgeon. For UKIP, Peter Whittle. And for the Greens, Sian Berry. Welcome, all of you. Hi. Can I begin by asking you, you've heard Boris there, Caroline, particularly you, because you follow him closely at City Hall as a member of the London Assembly. Give him marks out of 10.
Wow, goodness me, out of 10. I'd probably say 3 out of 10. The thing he got right, the Olympics, fantastic. Olympic and Paralympic Games, amazing. But he's been so obsessed with vanity projects. He really hasn't got into the detail and delivered the housing and transport improvement we need in London.
Sian?
Yeah, I'd add to that air pollution as well. I mean, we've seen ridiculous schemes like trying to glue the air pollution to the road and vanity projects. We've seen him starting to bring back road building projects to make the problem worse. It's one of the very biggest failures of Boris Johnson's mayoralty, I think, is the failure to get to grips with this, because so many people die from bad air in London every single year.
Peter, are you more of a fan?
Not really. I mean, I think he's been very good. Boris has been very good for Boris on the whole. I mean, he's a showman and all the rest of it. But I think that for me, one of the big failures was that he said that they would eliminate homelessness and rough sleeping, and that's doubled. That is a real serious failure, I think.
Can I talk to you about something that's perhaps a little brutal before we get on to what you want to discuss about your priorities? And that is, realistically, none of you can be the next mayor of London, can you? The electoral system doesn't allow it. It's a straight fight between Zach and Sadiq. You're in it really to get a seat on the London Assembly, is that right?
Not at all. This is an open race. Nobody knows any of the candidates particularly well, and you get a first and a second choice, and it's whoever's in that top two. So I'm fighting for every Liberal Democrat vote for the mayor, as well as Liberal Democrat votes for the Assembly.
I think as well, you know, politically we're in incredibly volatile times, and if you'd said 6 months ago or a year ago that Corbyn would have been leading the Labour Party, most people would have thought you were crazy. So, I mean, I think, you know, stranger things have happened.
Sian, could you possibly get into the top two?
We've seen much less likely winners of elections right across the spectrum recently, so I don't see why not. We mustn't prejudge the electorate here by assuming that they only know that they've got two choices. People have chosen the candidates that speak for their values much more often, more recently, and I think I do stand for those values.
So what is it that you're going to deliver for Londoners that's going to get you up into the final two on the ballot paper?
I think people think they know it's for the environment, but actually housing has been one of the issues on which Greens on the London Assembly for the past 16 years have worked the hardest. And also transport as well. I've worked as a transport campaigner for 12, 13 years now. I really do know that in detail. So somebody who's going to get to grips with the detail, which is something that Boris has completely failed to do, and clean up our transport and give people real options to walk, cycle and improve public transport. That's what I'll stand for, and I'll make sure the job gets done, because I will get stuck in.
Caroline, you presumably don't disagree about housing as the priority?
Absolutely, and I've got a costed plan to build the 200,000 homes we need over the 4-year term. But I've got the experience, having been at City Hall for the last 8 years, holding this mayor to account. I know what's affordable. I'm looking at bringing in half-price fares by 7:30 in the morning to really help low-income Londoners get into work, but also tackling things like the childcare crisis we have in the capital. I'm a mother myself. I know the huge cost of childcare for many parents trying to get back to work. We need to help those parents be able to return to the workforce to help London's economy.
You talk about a costed plan for new homes, but it's also a plan that will cost Londoners, because you want them to go on paying the Olympic precept on their council tax.
That's right, and if I've got a mandate to be Mayor of London, I'll set a new budget and it'll work out about 38 pence extra a week to Londoners to make sure we can borrow £2 billion to build huge numbers of homes for Londoners. I think it's a price worth paying.
Peter, is your campaign going to be obsessed with the Euro referendum?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's great that actually it's happening now, because I think it's extremely relevant to London, and of course I think that London would be, you know, have a fantastic future if we break free from the EU. But I think that what is important about my campaign is that we're all agreed about housing, we're all agreed about overcrowding in London, but I believe you've got to look at the demand side of that equation, not just the supply side, and that does mean talking about immigration, which I certainly would do. It's one of the great concerns for people in London, along with housing, and I think the mayor, or any candidate for the mayoralty, has a moral responsibility to talk about that.
OK, so we know how UKIP would take the heat out of demand, but what would you do about building more houses than Boris has done?
Well, I mean, for example, we certainly believe that you should go on brown sites. I live on a former brown site myself in Woolwich in London. I think we should definitely look at that. I think also we have to look as well at making sure that Londoners get priority. That's a crucial thing. We see that as being having been in London, or the particular borough in London, for about 5 years. Londoners should have priority when it comes to social housing too, definitely.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think UKIP are wrong about that on very, very many levels. If you look at what businesses have to say about restricting immigration into London, they need the workers to come and build the companies that create jobs for everybody else. And also, so many Londoners have partners, have friends who come from the EU. To come out of the EU would throw all that into absolute uncertainty, and it would be terrible for London. On housing, it's the public land we have to make the most of, and my plan is different to the other parties. I would break up the land that Transport for London have into smaller units and make sure we get a wider range of investors coming in.
And you also want to close
developers.
City Airport and turn that into a housing estate.
And I'd take the same approach there, letting co-ops, letting self-build, letting co-housing, councils all collaborate, developing smaller
Caroline,
sites.
can I talk to you about transport? It's something you know
Yes.
about particularly. In terms of getting fares down, halving the price of fares before 7:30, how is London going to be able to afford that?
Well, that costs around £30 million a year. So how we would fund that is we'd stop the Garden Bridge project. I would take all the funding out of that. I'd stop these road river crossings in East London and take another 10 million or so out of that. I'd also get rid of a perk that Transport for London staff have, which means they can nominate their lodger, their friend, to have free travel. So those are
That's
simple
going to go down
things
really
that I
badly
would...
with them.
Well, you
That's
know,
going to cost
they
you a
would
lot of
get
votes,
free
isn't it?
travel themselves, and I don't mind that, but I think this is a perk that's too far. So there's very serious things I'd take out of the budget to fund half-price fares, which I think is something that really will help Londoners. It will ease overcrowding in the morning
Have you
too.
got any plans for fares?
Yes, I think that what we're looking at is basically the people who are now most penalised are actually people outside. So we were looking at trying to reduce fares in the 4 to 6 zones in London, definitely. I mean, there's got to obviously be a huge investment in the infrastructure of London transport, there's without question. But at the same time, what we would also look at, and I think the Mayor's most important role is as a campaigning role, is looking at things such as HS2, which is going to decimate whole bits of North London and is a huge white elephant which is going to cost something like 80 billion. Now that's a national
something
thing.
you must agree on.
I'm a Camden councillor, and it would create a massive hole in the middle of Camden and huge amounts of disruption. So yeah, I'm agreed with Peter on that. On fares, my plans are really revolutionary. I want to flatten fares over time and immediately reduce the number of zones. And I'd also make fares cheaper for part-time workers as well, because part-time workers often pay below the living wage. So I'd bring down the daily cap to match the monthly travel card savings.
Sian, thank you very much. I'm going to have to stop you all there. We've run out of time, as always we do at this time. Thank you very much for joining us. The clock has beaten us. Thank you to Boris, to Peter, to Caroline and to Sian. I'll be back next month with another edition of The Late Debate. Until then, good night and thank you for watching.